Welcome back to the breath of the universe, where light and darkness blend, and all questions float in space like thinking specks of dust. Tonight, we are not talking about the brilliant stars, but about a moment when a strange object from far away touched the breath of the sun and changed everything science thought it understood. It is called 3I Atlas. The 24th of September 2023, a coronal mass ejection, a CME, was recorded by NASA. It carried the energy of trillions of nuclear bombs and traveled at more than 1,000 kilometers per second. According to prediction models, the plasma stream should have drifted harmlessly through empty space. No planet was in its path. But during orbital verification, scientists noticed a small point, an object drifting directly along the trajectory of the solar storm. That object was 3I Atlas, the third interstellar traveler ever detected by humankind. At first, 3I Atlas was thought to be just an odd comet, an ancient shard of ice passing through the solar system. But as the CME approached, telescopes observed something extraordinary. 3I Atlas was not swept away by the pressure of the plasma, nor did it melt under the immense heat. Instead of destruction, it absorbed the energy. Its brightness surged 40-fold within minutes. That light was not random. It pulsed in rhythmic, structured oscillations. When the spectral data was analyzed, scientists realized that the wavelengths emitted by 3I Atlas carried a patterned form of energy encoding. It resembled no natural signal ever recorded. Even more striking was the direction of that signal, not outward into deep space, but straight toward Earth. At NASA's Goddard Data Center, one engineer whispered, "No way, it's responding to the CME." The person beside him replied softly, "No, it's responding to us. When I think that, not cons, when I have to arch." In that instant, every assumption about the natural origin of 3I Atlas collapsed. The object seemed aware of being observed. It didn't merely exist, it acted. Observatories across Earth simultaneously detected electromagnetic variations synchronized with the light from 3I Atlas, energy pulses repeated in cycles, as though a system was actively controlling the response. There was no longer any doubt. This was not a random physical phenomenon. The scientific community began calling it the Intelligent Impact Event, an extraterrestrial object, absorbing the sun's energy and re-emitting it as an organized signal. It defied physics and hinted at something even more unsettling, that 3I Atlas might be a machine. For 4 hours and 17 minutes after the impact, it maintained an intense, luminous state, then slowly dimmed, leaving behind a signal sequence lasting over 11 minutes, like the overture of a symphony yet to be decoded. When those signals were recorded and analyzed, analysts found oscillations following prime numbers and the Fibonacci sequence, mathematical patterns often proposed in theories of intelligent communication. No one dared to declare it a greeting, but everyone knew this was no coincidence. From that collision onward, everything changed. 3I Atlas was no longer a faint light among the stars. It became the center of global obsession. Half the world believed it was the first proof of extraterrestrial intelligence. The other half stayed silent, for every physical explanation had failed. And in that silence, the universe seemed to whisper that we had just been chosen to witness something far beyond human understanding. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and we promise we won't miss your comments. And if you want to join me on the next journey where the mysteries of 3I Atlas begin to unfold, leave a little sign, the subscribe button. The news spread within hours, from solar observation stations to laboratories in Geneva and control centers in Pasadena, Tokyo, and Beijing. NASA's data was clear. 3I Atlas hadn't merely survived the CME, it was shining with intent. An extraterrestrial object, absorbing the sun's energy and transmitting an ordered signal toward Earth, an impossibility that was happening in real time. The first data streams left scientists stunned. The light pulses were perfectly periodic, distributed in flawless mathematical ratios, resembling artificial encoding. No known physical law could generate such an energy pattern. The SETI Institute, after half a century of listening for signals from space, immediately activated all its antennas. They compared, analyzed, recalibrated, but the signals from 3I Atlas matched nothing on record. They weren't radio, nor laser, nor microwave. They were something in between, a hybrid form of energy, half light, half magnetic field. A young scientist at Berkeley murmured, "Maybe this isn't a signal to us, but a signal between themselves." That single line opened a new line of thought. If 3I Atlas was a self-operating system, it could be communicating with other parts of itself, or with a hub somewhere beyond the solar system. International media immediately shifted focus. CNN, BBC, NHK, CCTV, Al Jazeera, all broadcasted the same question. What is 3I Atlas? At NASA, an emergency meeting lasted through the night. Physicists, plasma experts, cryptographers sat around a single screen displaying the oscillation graphs of the light. No one spoke for several minutes. One truth was undeniable. The signal had structure. A senior scientist whispered, "We've just received what SETI has dreamed of for a lifetime." Another replied, "Or a nightmare." Meanwhile, across social media, millions were watching live maps tracking 3I Atlas. Science channels, YouTubers, and podcasters ignited a global frenzy within days. The hashtag number 3IATLAS topped trends in over 40 countries. Some called it the first visitor. Others, the eye of the universe. Idedhi Selftis, the cautious simply said, the device. But amid the excitement, fear began to seep in. If this truly was an intelligent machine, and it was observing Earth, what would come next? Military organizations took notice. NORAD, ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, all activated their space radar networks, tracking every fluctuation from 3I Atlas. No one wanted to repeat the oldest mistake in history, ignoring a warning until it was too late. A leaked internal report from the U.S. National Security Agency contained a chilling note. If this technology can absorb solar energy, it surpasses human defense capability by at least several centuries. The impact event was no longer just a scientific issue. It had become a matter of planetary security. Across universities, students stayed up all night analyzing live data. Independent groups in Japan, Germany, India, and Vietnam began decoding the spectral signals. Their results aligned. A repeating pulse pattern built around the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, and a three-dimensional symmetry model. One blogger wrote, "This isn't just light. This is information. In Europe, Professor Elena Vasquez, the first to publish 3I Atlas's orbital analysis, returned to the public after months of silence. She spoke briefly, her voice low and measured. "We are observing an object that is deliberately reacting to the sun's energy. This cannot be coincidence. But before we call it a life form or a machine, remember, it still hasn't spoken to us." Her words became emblematic, a quiet reminder that silence can be its own language. As the solar storm dissipated, 3I Atlas returned to a stable state. Its brightness faded, but remained twice as strong as before the collision. It didn't drift, didn't deviate from its orbit, as if everything had gone according to plan. Analysts soon realized that 3I Atlas was now moving along a delicate curve, a trajectory calculated with surgical precision, passing by 3 planets: Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. Everything appeared deliberate. Every angle, every distance, as perfect as a line drawn on an engineer's blueprint. The CME event was no longer seen as an accident. It looked like a test, a demonstration, an object crossing through the sun's storm, absorbing, processing, and transmitting an organized signal back to Earth. Science was used to asking questions, but this time, the question was being asked of us. In the night sky, 3I Atlas drifted farther away, small, silent, yet holding enough energy to outshine the moon. Observers through telescopes described a light that seemed to breathe, as if the object were alive, as if it were waiting for us to understand. 3 days after the impact, all data from 3I Atlas was transferred to the processing centers of NASA, ESA, and the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. Thousands of terabytes of light information were compressed, encrypted, and distributed among dozens of independent research teams. No one was allowed to speculate. There was only one mission: find the pattern. The oscillation emitted by 3I Atlas after the collision repeated every 11 minutes and 23 seconds. Scientists called it Pattern 23-11. At first, they thought it was merely an echo of the absorbed energy. But when the waveform was magnified, something strange emerged. The oscillations were not random. They showed a 3-layer structure: optical, magnetic, and ionized particle energy. A light signal, but encoded like digital data. Quantum physicists at Caltech simulated the CME's energy response on quantum computers. No model could reproduce the same waveform. There was only one way such a structure could exist. It had to be designed. At an ESA meeting, an analyst said slowly, "If this is natural, it's the only such phenomenon in history. And if it's not, then someone just sent a signal." While physicists argued, cryptographers joined the effort. They treated 3I Atlas's emission as a kind of language. When the wavelengths were converted into audible frequencies, a deep tone emerged, the slow, steady pulse of an artificial heart. Some heard faint pauses within it, like commas and full stops in a coded message. A group in Kyoto found repeating prime numbers every 2 cycles. Another in Germany noticed that the ratio between energy peaks matched the Fibonacci sequence. No human language looked like this, yet everyone felt the same thing: intent. The signal from 3I Atlas seemed to be explaining itself. It carried no words, only structure, as if saying, "This is logic. This is how we think. That's en steth, ac, URKs." When scientists plotted the signal over time, an image appeared, a symmetrical spiral structure, like DNA, but triple-stranded. Molecular biologists looked at it and said a single word, alive. NASA quickly denied all speculation about extraterrestrial biology, but behind closed doors, researchers began to suspect that 3I Atlas might not be inert matter at all. It could be a self-sustaining system, a form of existence beyond our definition of life. In a private meeting, Professor Robert Klein of MIT said, "If it isn't alive, then it's a machine. And if it's a machine, it's millions of years ahead of us." From that moment, a race began. No one cared anymore where 3I Atlas came from. The real question was, what does it want? Observatories around the world focused on the region near the Sunday. They discovered that 3I Atlas's signal wasn't directed solely toward Earth. A fraction of it split, one stream toward Venus, another outward into deep space, where no planets lay. The pattern suggested two-way communication, one direction transmitting, one direction receiving, as if it were reporting. Data specialists at JPL called it the reflective dialogue pattern. No words, only rhythm. A pulse went out, and minutes later, a faint echo returned on the same frequency. No source could be found. No object, no satellite, no probe. But the echo existed. A researcher in Poland said quietly, "We're hearing both ends of a conversation. We just don't understand the language." Over the following week, scientific papers flooded out. For the first time, the term artificial signal appeared in official ESA documents. The global community split in two. One side insisted it was an extraordinary natural event, a plasma-matter interaction of unprecedented complexity. The other side believed 3I Atlas was artificial, a tool built by another civilization to collect information. Professor Avi Loeb, the same astrophysicist who once proposed the mothership theory for Oumuamua, appeared in Scientific American under the headline, "If 3I Atlas is a messenger." In his article, he wrote, "If you send a probe to another star system, you'd make it look like a comet, so no one would be afraid." The quote spread across the world. For the first time, the idea that 3I Atlas might have a mission was spoken aloud. At Harvard, Loeb's team re-examined radar and spectral data. They found a detail NASA had missed. After each 1 minute 2-3-second cycle, 3I Atlas emitted an electromagnetic pulse, 512 times stronger than average. The number 512, a perfect power of 2, was eerily familiar in digital computation. It could be coincidence, or not. At an Oxford symposium, a mathematician whispered, "Maybe this is the universe's version of Hello World." The phrase became an instant legend online. But to scientists, it meant something deeper, that humanity might be hearing its first greeting, in the language of another intelligence. As night fell, 3I Atlas drifted on, its light pulsing slowly, a distant heartbeat in the dark of space. No one knew what it was, but everyone sensed that the universe had finally opened its mouth, and whatever it was about to say could change everything. 2 weeks after transmitting its final signal, 3I Atlas fell silent. No more light oscillations, no more electromagnetic pulses, only a small, steady point of light drifting quietly in its near-solar orbit. Scientists thought the phenomenon was over, but one night in mid-October, The ESO telescope in Chile detected something unexpected. The brightness of 3I Atlas wasn't fading like a normal comet. It was increasing, slowly, hour by hour, forming an energy curve that no known physics could explain. High-resolution optical images revealed that its once smooth surface had changed. New reflective regions had appeared, forming symmetrical patterns, perpendicular, aligned, almost architectural. When this data was released, many dismissed it as a sensor error, yet independent observatories in Japan and South Africa recorded the same thing. 3I Atlas was changing shape. A researcher at ESA remarked, "No natural object can restructure its own matter within a plasma environment. This is impossible." And yet, the impossible was happening before their eyes. Luminous grids moved across the surface of 3I Atlas, as if streams of energy were sweeping through it, weaving a glowing network. The pattern wasn't random. It had rhythm, order, like a system rebooting itself. A NASA engineer described the event as controlled phase transition, a process theorized only in advanced quantum technology. No celestial body in recorded history had ever displayed such behavior, but 3I Atlas was doing it. Spectral data showed it reflecting light in two distinct directions, one toward the Sun and one toward Earth. Such divergence was impossible for a comet. It looked as though the object had unfolded a vast reflective surface, like the panels of a transmission array. Scientists named this formation the dual reflection band. Measurements suggested it spanned more than 15 kilometers, thinner than a human hair, yet thousands of times brighter than ice or cosmic dust. Gradually, the scientific community began to accept the unthinkable. 3I Atlas was no longer behaving like a natural body. It was behaving like a machine waking up. An emergency joint meeting between NASA, ESA, and CNSA was convened online. Objective: determine whether 3I Atlas posed any threat to the solar system. When the 3D reconstruction was shown, experts noticed its new form mirrored a symmetrical spiral, the same shape hidden within the earlier signal patterns. A physicist whispered, "It's turning the signal into structure." 1I have.m. From that moment, the phrase material language was born, a way of communication not through words, but through physical form. If the hypothesis was right, 3I Atlas was expressing information through geometry. Every shift, every reflective angle, was part of a message. Meanwhile, NASA's deep space sensors detected something else. From the core of 3I Atlas, a faint series of radio pulses emerged, each repeating every 23 minutes and 46 seconds. The signal was so weak it could only be found after hours of data integration, but its frequency matched the natural resonance of Earth's magnetic field. That discovery silenced every room. If 3I Atlas was emitting at Earth's magnetic frequency, it meant the object understood its solar environment and might be synchronizing itself with our planet. Some feared this was preparation for interference. Others believed it was an attempt to connect. On a televised science forum, Professor Loeb said, "Perhaps it didn't come to destroy, but to link. The problem is, we don't know who sent it." In the following week, 3I Atlas kept evolving. It expanded its reflective surfaces, forming 3 concentric rings around its luminous core. Each ring rotated at a different speed, and when sunlight struck them, the entire object glowed like a living sphere. An ESA pilot observing through a telescope described it simply, "It looks like an eye-opening." Calculations showed the total reflective area exceeded 200 square kilometers, an impossible scale for any natural body. No one understood how it could unfold material structure in a vacuum, yet its new form remained stable for days, balanced, controlled, as if it had completed the first stage of some unknown process. Scientists called it the morphological activation phase. The media used a simpler word: awakening. From that point on, 3I Atlas was no longer just an astronomical event. It became a global symbol, the embodiment of humanity's oldest question: are we alone? And if not, are they looking back at us through the eye of 3I Atlas? Late October 2023. The Sun entered its most active phase in 12 years. From solar observation stations around the world, scientists recorded a series of coronal mass ejections, CMEs, erupting day after day. But one of them was different. October 29, NX9, 2 class CME, the strongest of the decade, burst from the southern corona, its trajectory aligned almost perfectly with the current position of 3I Atlas. No one wanted to believe it was coincidence. Within hours, observatories worldwide turned their lenses toward the region. Some hoped to witness a flare of light, an ending. But what followed silenced the entire scientific community. The second CME struck 3I Atlas head-on. This time, the object didn't just absorb the energy, it reflected it. Optical sensors recorded the light from the collision, bending into a narrow beam aimed directly at Earth. Nothing like it had ever been seen. CMEs disperse outward in every direction. They don't focus their energy like a laser. But 3I Atlas had done exactly that. ESA radar stations in Spain detected an electromagnetic burst at 7.2 gigahertz, originating from 3I Atlas's coordinates. The pulse lasted precisely 88 seconds, then total silence. When the signal was decoded in its raw form, scientists discovered it wasn't binary. It was made of quantum oscillation chains, a form of data encoding unknown to human computing. A NASA physicist whispered, "This isn't a message, it's a data structure." That structure contained thousands of rhythmic pulses, steady as heartbeats, separated by perfect intervals of silence, like punctuation in a symphony of light. Within 12 hours of the event, every observatory on Earth registered the same transmission, each with different intensities. It couldn't be coincidence. 3I Atlas had broadcast a synchronized global signal, blanketing the entire planet. Experts called it the synchronized coverage phenomenon. For the first time, an extraterrestrial object had deliberately transmitted information to all of Earth simultaneously. In Japan, the Kyoto group found that the signal's energy peaks followed a logarithmic pattern, similar to the way humans encode sound waves. In Germany, researchers at Darmstadt identified numerical sequences corresponding to Planck's constant and the speed of light. In the United States, JPL discovered portions of the data matched the first collision's transmission, as if 3I Atlas were continuing a story it had begun months earlier. A JPL engineer said quietly, "We're listening to the second movement of the same composition." When both signals were combined, a three-dimensional model emerged. A double helix crossing at 23 points, each node carrying a unique energy signature. When plotted in spatial coordinates, the structure resembled the orbital map of the solar system, but offset by a minuscule angle, 0.005%. A deviation so precise, it could only have been intentional. When the model was simulated, scientists realized the helix wasn't closed. It extended outward, beyond Neptune's orbit, pointing directly toward the constellation Lyra. In a brief interview, Professor Loeb remarked, "If that's where the return signal comes from, then this could be the coordinate of its origin." In the following days, Earth was swept by a storm of speculation. Major news networks asked, had 3I Atlas just sent humanity a map or an invitation? At the United Nations, an emergency task force was established, the Interstellar Observation Council. Their mission: monitor every move of the object. No one dared to respond to the signal before understanding what they were dealing with. But while leaders debated, something else occurred. 3 hours after the second CME, Earth's ionospheric sensors detected faint electromagnetic ripples, matching the reflected frequency of 3I Atlas. Not strong, but global, as if the atmosphere itself had received a synchronized heartbeat. Physicists were baffled. The disturbance caused no interference, no damage. It simply made the upper atmosphere pulse softly every 88 seconds. For 3 days, the rhythm continued. Then it faded. Some began calling it the echo pulse, the heartbeat of 3I Atlas echoing across Earth's sky. It carried no message, but to many, it felt like the first sign of connection. From that moment, the phrase, "first contact," swept across the globe. Scientists remained cautious, but the public could no longer contain their awe. Millions gazed up at the night sky, searching for the faint glimmer of 3I Atlas. They knew that somewhere out there, an object had touched the sun's energy and sent something back, something humanity could not yet understand. No one knew whether it was a message, a warning, or an experiment. They only knew that from that moment on, every antenna, every telescope, every human mind was waiting, because the universe had spoken a second time, and this time, it called Earth by name. November 2023. After 2 collisions with the sun's CMEs, 3I Atlas stabilized its orbit. Its brightness faded slowly, but never vanished. NASA and ESA's infrared telescopes continued to track every minute fluctuation of the object. Then came a discovery that froze everyone in their tracks. While reanalyzing data from the second CME event, scientists noticed a strange anomaly in its motion. 3I Atlas was moving more slowly than expected, not because of drag, but because its mass had increased. Using orbital data and spectral imaging, the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics estimated 3I Atlas's current mass to be 33 billion tons, nearly 10 times higher than previous calculations. No comet or icy body could possibly reach that number. Even a solid iron asteroid could not maintain structural integrity under such heat and gravitational stress near the sunday. A physicist muttered, "That mass isn't just abnormal, it's impossible." There's now we're doing the word, and won the setting with pride. The Dave Frun. In classical physics, an object that massive would generate a gravitational field strong enough to bend the light around it. But optical data showed the opposite. There was no gravitational lensing, no measurable pull at all. In other words, it had mass without gravity. That cannot exist within Einstein's framework. There is no matter without a gravitational field, unless it could control gravity itself. Physicists named the phenomenon localized anti-gravity compensation, a hypothetical state where quantum energy cancels gravitational effects, rendering mass invisible. If 3I Atlas truly possessed such control, it was millions of years ahead of human science. An emergency summit convened in Geneva with delegates from 40 global research institutions. Data from NASA, ESA, JAXA, Roscosmos, and CNSA were cross-checked. The results were identical and terrifying. The mass of 3I Atlas increased after each solar impact, yet its gravitational force remained zero. Professor Elena Vasquez spoke during the session. Mathematically, 3I Atlas shouldn't exist, and yet there it is, hanging in our sky. When the analysis was published, the world split. Half the scientific community called it a computational error. The other half believed it was proof of physics being manipulated. Some went further. They proposed that 3I Atlas was not a solid object at all, but a compressed energy field, a region of space where matter and energy had folded in on themselves. If true, then 3I Atlas didn't have mass in the traditional sense. It was the manifestation of condensed energy, like an inverted black hole. A black hole pulls energy in. 3I Atlas pushes it out. A Japanese physicist coined the term artificial white hole, a theoretical counterpart to a black hole, never observed in the real universe. If it existed, it could be a vent for matter from another dimension. The idea was controversial until NASA released thermal data. Then everything changed. 3I Atlas didn't just reflect sunlight. It emitted negative heat, a form of reversed radiation, where energy flowed into space instead of outward. No natural object can do that. A NASA engineer whispered in the briefing room, "We're watching the laws of physics being rewritten." From that moment, all measurements defied logic. Mass increased, temperature dropped, brightness stayed constant. No material loss, no evaporation. It was as if no atoms existed inside 3I Atlas at all. Scientists began speculating that the object contained a vast hollow core, or perhaps a self-sustaining quantum system. Its structure could be using solar energy to expand, as living organisms use food to grow. A bolder theory emerged. 3I Atlas was a living machine, operating on quantum biological principles, a form of life not based on DNA, but on the oscillations of pure energy. In an interview, Professor Avi Loeb said, "Perhaps what we're witnessing is a biological form of technology, a living system built out of physics itself." His words triggered an uproar, but no one could refute the data. Every measurement pointed to the same conclusion. 3I Atlas obeyed none of the physical laws governing ordinary matter. When MIT researchers simulated a 33 billion-ton object using gravitational models, the results showed it should distort the orbits of nearby planets. Yet in reality, Mercury, Venus, and Earth remained perfectly stable, as if that immense mass existed only on paper. A mathematician commented quietly, "Maybe it's hiding its mass in another dimension." One conjured, if that were true, then 3I Atlas wasn't merely extraterrestrial, it was interdimensional, a machine capable of moving through or storing energy between universes. And if such technology existed, its creators had mastered the fabric of space-time itself. From that point on, every concept of gravity, matter, and energy had to be rewritten. 3I Atlas, the third known interstellar object, had become a fracture line in humanity's understanding of reality. No one dared call it a comet anymore. No one was sure it was a spacecraft either. It had become something in between, not entirely alive, not entirely mechanical. As it drifted outward, still within the sun's reach, scientists observed one final anomaly. The space around its orbit grew suddenly cold. A vast thermal shadow spread thousands of kilometers, a region where light slowed slightly, a measurable pause in the speed of photons. No one knew if it was a side effect or an intention. But one thing was certain. 3. I-Atlas had proven that human physics was only a chapter, and the next one was being written by something else. The 12th of November, 2023. 3. I-Atlas began moving behind the sun into the region where no telescope from Earth could see. All optical tracking was lost. Only faint radio whispers remained, the last traces confirming it was still out there. At first, space agencies assumed this was normal orbital behavior, but after 2 days, the signals vanished completely. No light reflection, no electromagnetic pulse, no sign of anything. Silence fell across the scientific world. No one said it aloud, but everyone was thinking the same thing. 3. I-Atlas might be gone. Observatories in Hawaii, Chile, and Spain reported the same result: absolute void, a perfect darkness, where once there had been the energy of a small star. By the third night, rumors flooded the internet. Some claimed 3 I-Atlas had disintegrated. Others believed it had cloaked itself. Fake videos and edited photos spread fast, but none could be verified. NASA held an emergency press briefing, saying only, "We have temporarily lost contact with the object. Observation will resume once it emerges from the solar corona." The statement reassured no one. In all of astronomy's history, no object had ever completely vanished behind the sunday. For days, scientists stayed awake, sending constant scans and data sweeps, but nothing came back. No noise, no signal, only the vast silence, a kind of silence that felt like being watched. Day 4, something strange began to happen. Radio stations across Europe detected faint interference at 7,2 GHz, the exact frequency once used by 3 I-Atlas. But the source wasn't in space. It was coming from Earth's ionosphere. No one understood how. It wasn't a reflection, nor instrument noise. It was as if something, or someone, was replaying the signal from within the planet itself. A physicist in Germany whispered, "Maybe it didn't disappear. Maybe it just moved." As the news spread, the world split in two. Half believed it was a message. The other half feared it was an intrusion. International space security agencies convened in secret. This was no longer a matter of science. It was a question of survival. On television, calm faces tried to reassure the public, but their eyes betrayed the truth. Anxiety spread faster than any signal. Day 5, a new anomaly appeared. In the optical range near the sun, a faint point of light emerged, not where it was supposed to be, but offset by 0.4 degrees, exactly where ESA radar had once detected an energy reflection. No one could confirm it was 3 I-Atlas, but every telescope turned toward it. The light blinked, once every 88 seconds, the same rhythm as the echo pulse. Once again, the universe was knocking. By the 6th night, combined data from 3 observatories showed that 3 I-Atlas was moving slowly and changing course. It was no longer traveling away from the Sunday. It was turning back toward Earth. No one wanted to believe it, but every reading confirmed it. The object was returning, its speed increasing, following an orbit no natural force could produce. Inside NASA's control room, the air was frozen. Only one voice broke the silence. "Maybe it's entering the next phase of its mission." No one replied. No one knew what that mission could be. Day 7. Before 3 I-Atlas re-emerged from behind the sun, SOHO's energy sensors recorded a burst of radiation equal to 0.1% of the sun's total output, a number thought to be impossible. The flare lasted 33 seconds, then faded. When the light vanished, a new reflective point appeared ahead of Earth's orbit. Small, dim, but unmistakable. 3I Atlas had returned, but something was different. Its shape was flatter, its light shifted into a new spectrum, a deep blue wavelength, never before recorded from any natural object. Scientists said only one line: 3I Atlas did not return as it left. Across Earth, people looked up at the night sky, watching a single point of light reappear after 7 days of silence. No one knew whether it was a sign of hope or a warning from the cosmos. But everyone understood one thing: the silence was over. And as it returned, humanity was no longer the same. After 7 days of silence, 3I Atlas returned to visible range. Its signal was twice as strong as before. A blue luminescent haze wrapped around its surface, a kind of electromagnetic mist, no longer chaotic, but rhythmic, steady, as if everything had fallen into its own equilibrium. Across the world, telescopes locked back onto it. Fresh orbital data shattered every prior model. 3I Atlas was no longer following a comet's elliptical path. It had shifted to a spiraling orbit, so complex that only quantum simulations could describe it. The most alarming detail: every intersection along that spiral, aligned precisely with the positions of the solar system's planets, off by less than 0.005%. Nothing in nature is that precise. An astronomer at Oxford said quietly, "This isn't an orbit. This is handwriting." When ESA's team built a 3D model and projected the spiral into stellar coordinates, they found something uncanny. The nodal points of the orbit formed a double helix, a pattern strikingly similar to DNA. No one dared assign meaning, but the coincidence was enough to silence the room. Physics gave way to philosophy. Some began to suspect that 3I Atlas, the certain sign, was transmitting a hidden message through its path, a geometric language of the cosmos. When NASA mapped the orbit against time, they noticed each spiral corresponded exactly to a light frequency previously emitted by the object, as if its trajectory wasn't just motion, but the lingering trace of a light symphony played across its journey around the Sunday. A NASA engineer whispered, "We're not just watching an object move, we're listening to the mathematics of the universe." In simulations, 3I Atlas's path intersected Earth's orbit. In December, precisely the date earlier transmissions had predicted, too exact to be coincidence. ESA issued an alert to every observatory. 3I Atlas is entering an intersection zone with Earth's orbit. Not a collision, but a close approach, just 0.04 astronomical units, roughly 6 million kilometers. In cosmic terms, the blink of an eye. At the same time, its emissions changed. The 88-second rhythm was gone. The intervals stretched, then shortened, following a new, irregular pattern. When decoded, the frequencies matched. Coordinated universal time. Every passing Earth hour, a new signal pulsed, never early, never late, as though it had synchronized itself to human time. A JPL physicist said, "It knows we're watching, and now it's keeping time with us." The Nastro of the Kos, the Nastro of the Pop of the Baghdad. That single realization reshaped the question: was 3I Atlas adapting to humanity's temporal framework, learning how to communicate in our rhythm? The next emission came exactly at 0 UTC, November 21, what scientists began calling the first contact window. Its light intensity rose by 10%, then stopped abruptly. Moments later, instead of emitting, it began reflecting sunlight in an entirely new pattern. For several hours, its surface flashed in organized bursts, forming clusters of glowing symbols. ESA's satellites recorded them. 3 recurring shapes: a circle, a diagonal line, and a central dot. When analyzed mathematically, those 3 forms mapped perfectly to the positions of Earth, the Moon, and the geostationary orbit. It was as if 3I Atlas was drawing the coordinates of its own observers. A systems engineer said in a trembling voice, "It knows we're looking, and it's looking back." From that moment, the phrase, "the trajectory truth," spread through the scientific community. No one called 3I Atlas a comet anymore. Its movement was deliberate, each intersection carrying information. Professor Avi Loeb called it art within mathematics. "There are objects," he said, "that exist to challenge perception, and others that exist to teach us how to see the universe in another language." The leader Asperu, when the full orbital model was completed, one last revelation emerged. The path of 3I Atlas was not escaping the solar system. It was tightening, each turn drawing it closer to Earth. Each orbit was a stroke, and together they formed an immense pattern around the Sun, a symmetrical structure resembling an energy diagram. When the crossing points were connected, the image appeared, a golden spiral, the precise mathematical ratio found in nature, in art, and in living forms. A mathematician whispered, "This isn't coincidence. It's geometry as language." In the stillness of space, 3I Atlas drifted like a pen across the dark, writing a note upon the fabric of the cosmos. Every movement, every reflection was a silent sentence, and for those patient enough to read it, it became clear this wasn't a journey. It was a lesson, a teaching of order, of life, of intelligence beyond the reach of human comprehension. On Earth, telescopes continued to follow its slow blue arc. Each night, the soft azure light of 3I Atlas moved across the star maps, like an invisible hand, tracing meaning through silence. The universe was writing, and humanity was learning to read with its eyes. After the true orbit of 3I Atlas was revealed, the scientific community split in two. One side believed it was a gesture of peace, a greeting written in the language of mathematics. The others saw it as reconnaissance, a calculated act of observation before something greater. The dark forest theory resurfaced. In the vastness of space, every civilization is a hidden hunter. To send a signal is to reveal one's position, and every other civilization must see that revelation as a threat. Professor Avi Loeb disagreed. He said, "If life out there has survived longer than ours, it no longer needs to attack to prove its existence. Perhaps they simply want us to know that someone is still listening in the dark." But the truth was, no one knew what 3I Atlas was thinking. No one knew if it had come to communicate or to watch. And in the silence between those two possibilities, fear began to take shape. The great powers went quiet. No statements, no denials. Secret meetings filled the nights, because everyone understood, if 3I Atlas was intelligent, then every word spoken from Earth might already be overheard. In the shadows of radar stations, a global hush settled in, and humanity could only wait. The 29th of December 2023, scientists called this phase the final window, the moment when 3I Atlas would pass closest to Earth. Hundreds of telescopes powered on simultaneously. No one spoke. Everyone waited to see if it would speak again. 0 UTC. 3I Atlas began to glow, not in a blinding flare as before, but in short, steady pulses, like a heartbeat. The transmission lasted exactly 7 minutes and 12 seconds. Then, silence. When the data was processed, analysts found that each flash matched the relative distances between the planets of the solar system, as though the object were transmitting a map of its own journey. Then, slowly, 3I Atlas drifted away, out of view. No more light, no more signal, only a blank space on the radar screens. And yet, in that silence, everyone understood one thing. It hadn't vanished. It had simply departed. According to NASA's projections, 3I Atlas would return in 7 years. Across the final night of the year, a faint streak crossed the dark horizon. No sound, only silence. A silence that spoke. The story closed there, but in the depths beyond, the universe was still listening. And somewhere out there, 3I Atlas continued its drift, a reminder that humanity had brushed its fingertips against the edge of the unknowable. If you're listening, take a second to like and subscribe. It helps us continue this quiet journey, a voyage through the stars, where every question might lead to a truth beyond imagination. January 2024. Just weeks after 3I Atlas vanished from view, a team of 20 scientists from different nations uploaded a 97-page report to the open data platform RxIve. Its title contained only 3 words: Trajectory Intelligence Signature. The report sent shockwaves through the scientific world. The authors claimed that 3I Atlas exhibited clear traits of an intelligently guided object. Not a comet, not an asteroid, and certainly not a natural body. They presented orbital precision, structural transformations, signal synchronization with coordinated universal time, each too deliberate, too perfect to be random. Professor Samuel Richter, lead author, stated in a brief Zoom press conference, "We're not saying 3I Atlas is an alien spacecraft. We're saying it behaves as if it has a purpose." That single sentence was enough to ignite the world. Mainstream institutions responded swiftly. NASA and ESA released a joint statement. There is no verified evidence that 3I Atlas is of artificial origin. Yet they did not dispute the data itself, only said that further verification is required. In science, silence isn't denial, it's hesitation. The media frenzy erupted overnight. CNN called it the scientific bombshell of the century. Nature described it as the first fracture in the wall of conservative astronomy. Right is for quiet. What we'll go through, independent journals were blunter. If this team is right, astrophysics will never be the same. Within 24 hours, the paper had been downloaded over 3 million times. Scientific forums overflowed with debate, and those who had stayed silent during the 3I Atlas event finally began to speak. Professor Elena Vasquez, who had first mapped its orbit, appeared on live television. "I've seen their data. It matches what I once observed myself. I just wasn't ready to believe it then." Axis traps. One detail drew particular attention. The team had found a cyclic feedback pattern in the spectral signal emitted by 3I Atlas before it disappeared. When converted to sound frequencies, it formed a repeating rhythm, a deep siete, tres, dos pulse, matching exactly the orbital periods of Earth, Venus, and Mars. A young astronomer suggested quietly, maybe it wasn't sending a message to us. Maybe it was sending it to all three worlds. Then, a leaked email from inside NASA surfaced. Its first line read, "We may be facing the first evidence of intelligent trajectory in the universe." An internal investigation followed. Several contributors were suspended, but the controversy only amplified. Across YouTube, podcasts, and science networks, a new phrase began circulating: AI interstellar probe. An idea equal parts science and myth, credible enough to inspire hope and distant enough to stir fear. Professor Avi Loeb, long at the center of this storm, finally broke his silence. In a short interview, he said, "This team isn't wrong. They're simply answering with data, not emotion." He added, "Science doesn't exist to protect reputation. It exists to pursue truth." The quote spread worldwide. Loeb became a symbol of bold science, and 3I Atlas, a symbol of a new kind of awakening. From hushed meetings to open debates, the realization grew. 3I Atlas was no longer just an object in space. It had become a philosophical mirror, a question aimed back at humanity itself. If it was guided by intelligence, whose intelligence was it? If it was created, do its creators still exist? And if it was merely a machine, what or who waits at the other end of its signal? These questions marked the dawn of a new era, the age of scientific uncertainty, a time when every theory could be true, and every answer contained a deeper mystery. Because in the realm of science, the most dangerous thing is not to be wrong, but to be right too soon. 2 days after the report was released, 10 of the 20 scientists who had signed it withdrew their names. They said they needed more time to verify the data, but the media saw it as a fracture. Half wanted to stand by the findings, the other half wanted to retreat, to avoid becoming the next targets of a storm of criticism. Major institutions began to respond. The American Institute of Astrophysics issued a statement claiming the group's report contains inconsistencies in signal processing. Nature Astronomy postponed publication of the paper, and affiliated universities jointly demanded a re-examination of the objectivity of the measurements. USAID had friend Prevangers and rest from that when the gray Janian, but when the raw data was released, every independent replication produced the same result. The signal from 3I Atlas truly followed a consistent rhythm, and its orbital behavior still defied explanation. The more people tried to dismiss it, the harder it became to deny that something lay beyond current human understanding. Behind closed doors, the researchers were torn between two choices: silence or truth. Professor Samuel Richter wrote in an internal email, "It's not that we want to believe. The data leaves us no choice but to." Soon, several members were hounded by the press. Home addresses, social media accounts, all exposed and debated. Headlines screamed, "Scientists who believe in aliens." Science was slowly being turned into spectacle. Yet amid the noise, a few remained steadfast. They kept rechecking every number, reanalyzing every frame of data, and the deeper they went, the stranger the patterns became. Comparing radar readings with optical signals, the team noticed that 3I Atlas wasn't following the laws of inertia. At brief intervals, it stopped, then continued, as if adjusting its own trajectory. No natural object could do that, without being torn apart by its own momentum. That discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific world. If 3I Atlas could alter its course, it wasn't merely a flying object, it was a navigation system. Before public debate could cool, an independent Canadian research group released a confirming report. Their findings matched the original data almost perfectly. Doubt evaporated. Something extraterrestrial, or an unidentifiable machine, was operating within the solar system. As the revelation spread, governments fell silent. Every official statement was suspended. Their silence unsettled the public, far more than any denial could have. At the end of January, an emergency summit was convened in Geneva. No live stream, no press, only delegates from the world's major space agencies. The 20 scientists were ordered to present the original observation files. During the session, Professor Richter spoke calmly. "We've hidden nothing. All data is public. If anyone wishes to refute us, let them do it with the data." Data. The room went still. No one replied, until one voice murmured, "If you're right, then 3I Atlas has changed everything." And that was the moment when the course of scientific history shifted. From that point onward, everyone understood. This was no longer a crisis about a single object. It was a crisis of belief in the boundaries humanity once thought it understood. As the news spread, the academic world split sharply in two. One side believed that science must safeguard the stability of knowledge. The other believed that science could only survive if it dared to step beyond its own safety. The world's top universities began to take public positions. MIT declared, every hypothesis must be verified through experiment, and there is currently no physical evidence that 3I Atlas is of artificial origin. Cambridge, however, said something different. A lack of evidence does not mean non-existence. The debate became the axis of global attention. Scientists, long accustomed to the quiet of laboratories, were now thrust under the glare of cameras. Hours-long interviews, live debates watched by millions, and the discussion shifted away from data toward belief in the scientific method itself. Professor Avi Loeb appeared once more. Standing before the plain backdrop of his Harvard office, he spoke slowly. The question isn't whether 3I Atlas is real. The question is whether we have the courage to question what we believe is real. Asked that mein Remenner. The quote rippled across social media. Millions began to question how science truly functioned. Had humanity, in its devotion to precision, unknowingly closed the door on the unexplainable? The space agencies stayed silent. No denials, no confirmations, and that silence alone was enough to make 3I Atlas the defining topic of an era. Meanwhile, a group of independent mathematicians in Switzerland released their own analysis. They demonstrated that the orbit of 3I Atlas could not have formed randomly without at least one element of artificial control. The finding poured fuel on the fire. Conservatives accused them of misinterpreting probability. Progressives smiled, because for them, even a small probability was enough to open the door to infinite possibility. On television, hosts asked the same question. What is it that makes humanity afraid of the truth? No one had an answer. Perhaps because if 3I Atlas truly possessed intelligence, then every theory about humanity's place in the universe would need to be rewritten from the beginning. At a closed symposium in Washington, a NASA representative spoke briefly. We are living through a stage much like when humanity first discovered black holes. No one believed, and then everyone had to. The room fell silent, until a young scientist said quietly, "But this time, we're not just seeing a phenomenon, we're seeing intention." That sentence was recorded and spread faster than any official statement. It captured what everyone felt, but no one dared to admit. From that moment, the concept of intelligence beyond humanity was born. Not alien life as we imagine it, but any system capable of autonomous thought and decision, acting beyond biological law, a form of intelligence shaped not by life, but by the evolution of matter itself. That idea was called dangerous. Scholars warned it might push science into a new, post-human age. But others said, perhaps we've already been in that age for a long time. We just didn't notice. As February began, the debate showed no signs of cooling. The more data was released, the clearer it became that truth no longer fit neatly inside equations. It was expanding, like the light of a newborn star, breaking through the long night of understanding. February 2024. From a modest scientific report, 3I Atlas had become the most mentioned name on the planet. No longer confined to laboratories, it appeared on T-shirts, murals, and electronic music posters. From Tokyo to New York, the image of that blue glowing object covered billboards and city walls. People painted it on buildings, etched its spiral emblem onto their phones, and began calling it the Eye of the Universe. Ves. That the Sat of the Sanzo. Some artists said that gazing into the light of 3I Atlas felt like being gazed back at, a sensation both distant and intimate, like remembering something that was never yours. The media, of course, could not resist. Every network had its own 3I Atlas segment. Talk shows, podcasts, and short-form videos overflowed with theories, from rigorous analyses to ideas far beyond imagination. It earned a new title, The Messenger of Solar Energy. In another corner of the world, a group of musicians transformed its recorded signals into music, translating light waves into drum beats and streaming it live to millions. When the sound filled the air, listeners felt something uncanny, a rhythm not made by human hands, yet one that made them close their eyes and breathe deeply. Public opinion began to shift. People no longer feared 3I Atlas. They saw it as a higher form of existence, proof that the universe still operated by laws humanity had yet to understand. While scientists argued, ordinary people simply saw it as something beautiful. If you're still listening, remember to like and subscribe so you can continue this journey with us. Every story of the cosmos is a small piece of your own memory, and perhaps, one day, you'll be the one who writes humanity's next question. In major cities, open-air light shows were held. 3D projectors cast the blue spiral of 3I Atlas into the night sky. Crowds gathered, staring upward in silence, not searching for answers, but realizing they were living through a singular moment in history. Yet not everyone was comforted. Conservative religious groups warned that glorifying 3I Atlas was dangerous, that humanity was worshiping what it does not understand. Werecaster. They feared blind faith in an alien intelligence might dull humankind's instinct for survival. But those voices were soon drowned by a tide of curiosity and wonder sweeping across the globe. On social media, fake accounts claiming to decode the light of 3I Atlas appeared. Videos with millions of views mixed science, mysticism, and art. No one knew what was real anymore, but everyone was enthralled by the same story. Scientists grew uneasy, but they couldn't stop the wave. A psychologist commented, "When people are afraid, they seek gods. When they're curious, they create myths." And somehow, 3I Atlas had become the new myth of the modern world. In Europe, a circle of young philosophers formed a movement called the Quiet Mind Project, a call for humanity to listen to the universe. It is a big and the mine. They believed 3I Atlas was not just an extraterrestrial object, but a physical manifestation of cosmic consciousness, something unmeasurable, yet perceptible through stillness. Talks on universal consciousness became a trend. People stopped fearing the unknown. They began to love the silence and to realize that sometimes truth doesn't emerge from theory, but from the act of simply watching. At the end of February, on a calm night, an observatory in Chile recorded a faint reflection from 3I Atlas, a short sequence of light flickers, 3 in total. No signal, no sound, just 3 slow flashes fading into darkness. Scientists called it the nod of the universe. The public had another word for it, a greeting. March 2024. As the month began, public excitement gave way to unease. People started to wonder if 3I Atlas had truly sent an intelligent signal. Why hadn't anyone released new data since? The world's major space agencies, NASA, ESA, JAXA, remained silent. No statements, no new reports, only the same weary phrase. The object is currently beyond observation range. But orbital trackers knew that wasn't true. 3I Atlas was still well within range of high-energy radar systems. The lack of new data only convinced the public that the truth was being hidden. Rumors began to surface. A former NASA engineer, speaking anonymously, claimed that the signals from 3I Atlas had not only been recorded in orbit, but also detected within Earth's upper atmosphere. According to him, some of the frequencies overlapped with military satellite channels. No one confirmed the claim, but it spread quickly across the globe. On social media, the hashtag #HiddenSignal exploded. Millions shared imagined leaked data, while hundreds of independent analysis channels appeared within a week. The less official information there was, the more people began to tell their own versions of the story. The original 20 scientists found themselves under siege. Some lost funding, others their positions, and a few walked away entirely. Professor Richter posted a short message. "We've spent our lives exploring the universe, but we were never prepared for it to listen back." The words spread like a chill through online forums. If 3I Atlas could truly listen, then all efforts to hide the truth might already be futile. Meanwhile, in several countries, intelligence agencies began monitoring the public exchange of space data, posts, images, and reports mentioning 3I Atlas vanished hours after being uploaded. People began to ask the question aloud: did the governments know more than they admitted? Sometimes, what isn't said matters more than what is. One March night, an independent observatory in Iceland reported something unusual. Their radar detected a brief reflection at the coordinates where 3I Atlas was believed to be. The signal lasted 4 minutes, matching exactly the 88-second pulse pattern from before. They sent the data to NASA for verification, but a few days later, their entire website disappeared. No data, no domain, only a short message. Under maintenance. People whispered that the group had been silenced, though no one could prove it. And it was that uncertainty that made the story feel more real than ever. An investigative journalist wrote, "When truth is buried, humanity begins to invent its own versions." And it did. Theories bloomed like seedlings after rain. Some said 3I Atlas was a messenger from an ancient civilization. Others claimed it was human technology, a secret probe launched long ago. None could be verified, but all of them kept the world awake. In the quiet, The universe continued as always, and 3i Atlas drifted on. It didn't need to speak, because its silence alone was enough to make humanity ask, more than ever before, were we witnessing the future or merely staring into our own reflection? April 2024. The story of 3i Atlas had long escaped the confines of laboratories. It was no longer just an object in space. It had become a test of how humanity faces what it cannot understand. At scientific conferences, people no longer discussed trajectories or spectral patterns. Instead, they spoke of belief, of how truth is born and how it is hidden. Universities still sent representatives to hearings, but everyone knew the issue was no longer about data. It was about the fracture of an ancient faith, the belief that science is always light and that knowledge is the only path to truth. A student in Paris wrote in her journal, "The most frightening thing isn't that something might exist out there, but that we no longer know whom to trust down here." That sentence spread across the world, a small mirror reflecting the global atmosphere, a mix of curiosity and quiet dread. Humanity began to doubt not just the universe, but the very way it tried to understand it. The media called this moment the silent age of science, an age where every statement was measured, as if a single misplaced word could erase the credibility of an entire generation. Those who had once confidently proclaimed, "This is evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence," now spoke more softly, and those who had once dismissed everything grew pensive, for they sensed that new data was slowly eroding their silence. In a quiet corner, far from cameras and microphones, some continued their work. A small group within the Harvard Astrophysics Department had secretly archived spectral data from 3i Atlas before the object vanished from observation. When they reanalyzed it, they found a faint recurring signal, a pulse every 23 minutes and 46 seconds, matching precisely the frequency seen in the early days. The data was sent directly to Professor Avi Loeb. He read through it all and said nothing. No interviews, no papers, no press statements. Colleagues later said he spent hours by the window of his Harvard office, staring into the night sky. At last he broke his silence with a single line. "If this is real, then perhaps we are not merely observing an object, but standing before a system designed to observe us." No recording captured that moment, but those who were present recalled a deep stillness that followed, not heavy, but profound, as if a door had quietly opened into another realm of thought. From that remark, a new theory began to take shape. It was given a simple, evocative name, the mothership theory. According to it, 3i Atlas was not a lone traveler. It was a central hub, a mothership surrounded by smaller autonomous probes hidden within solar orbits near the sun, gathering data on Earth and the solar system, like an alien observation network. No one knew if it was true, but the world was ready to listen. After everything that had happened, the question was no longer, what is 3i Atlas, but why did it come here? And in the stillness of that spring, while its faint blue light flickered far beyond reach, humanity began to understand. Perhaps, from the very beginning, they had not only been watching a phenomenon, they had been watched in return. May 2024. Professor Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer, published a paper that shook the scientific world. Its title was simple yet seismic: The Mothership Theory. He proposed that 3i Atlas was not a natural object, but a guided, purposeful system, a mothership possibly carrying smaller devices hidden near the sun to observe Earth and the solar system. According to Loeb, the object's symmetrical structure, its ability to absorb energy, and its rhythmic signal pattern were all signs of technology, not random physics, but deliberate behavior. He wrote, "If an advanced civilization wanted to observe us, they wouldn't need to send a message. They would only need to send an eye." The hypothesis spread across the globe like wildfire. Major newspapers called it the boldest idea of the century. Supporters hailed Loeb as a pioneer, the one brave enough to say what others quietly suspected. Critics accused him of crossing the line, turning science into philosophy. At a Harvard discussion, Loeb spoke plainly. The question isn't what 3i Atlas is. The question is whether we're willing to accept that we are being observed. That line traveled like a spark, touching both fear and wonder, because deep down, everyone understood that perhaps, all along, humanity had never been the center of the universe. The mothership theory became the heart of global debate. No one could disprove it, but no one could prove it either. It existed in that fragile space between science and belief. And as night fell, observatories around the world kept their eyes fixed on 3i Atlas, as if one more flicker of light might finally turn the theory into truth. After its publication, the mothership theory spread faster than any scientific paper in history beyond astronomy. Across every corner of global media, major newspapers launched dedicated columns on 3i Atlas. Evening talk shows debated it nightly. Some politicians referenced it in speeches, calling it a chance for humanity to look at itself through the eyes of the cosmos. But not everyone agreed. Conservative scholars accused Loeb of exaggerating a natural phenomenon. They said he was planting belief where there was no proof, and that science must never rest on emotion. Loeb, calm amid the storm, replied simply, "If this makes people question their place in the universe, then science has done its job." Confanly Ewald. At NASA, secret meetings began. Teams re-examined every line of data on 3i Atlas, and several researchers quietly admitted that certain parameters couldn't be reproduced by natural models. Yet to admit that publicly would mean breaking centuries of intellectual order, a quiet revolution in the faith of reason itself. Meanwhile, in Europe, the ESA released a cautious statement. There is no conclusive evidence that 3i Atlas is artificial, but current data cannot rule out the possibility. Vague as it was, that single sentence electrified the world. Within weeks, the mothership theory became the planet's most discussed topic. It left the laboratory and entered culture. Songs, art, and even sermons began invoking it. In a small church in Italy, a priest told his congregation, "If another intelligence is watching us, perhaps that too is how God reminds us that the universe was never ours alone." The phrase spread like a new kind of prayer. Online, hundreds of amateur signal tracking channels appeared. People built makeshift antennas, shared recordings, and waited for the next pulse, the one that might prove it was all true. The speed of its spread alarmed governments. Some nations restricted the release of space data. Others blocked access to frequency-sharing networks. But suppression only deepened the mystery. Academics began calling it the Loeb effect, a phenomenon where a single hypothesis, without full evidence, but with the right question, can shift the collective perception of an entire planet. At a conference in Geneva, a scientist summed it up in a single line: "We may not yet know the truth about 3i Atlas, but it has already changed how humanity looks at itself." Because sometimes A hypothesis isn't born to prove something true, but to remind us how little we've truly understood the universe. Avi Loeb's mothership theory had slipped beyond the boundaries of science. As belief spread, nations began to divide. Some governments saw it as a chance for collaboration, an opportunity to study possible alien technology if the theory proved true. Others saw it as a threat, evidence that humanity might be under observation, or worse, under experiment. Inside NASA and ESA, divisions deepened. One faction demanded full transparency. The other insisted on silence until verified proof emerged. No one wanted to repeat the mistakes of the UFO era. When mysteries became mockery, Loeb himself remained silent. He tried not to persuade anyone. He only said, in a brief interview, "When humans fear what they don't understand, they call it a danger." But the real danger wasn't 3I Atlas itself. It was how humanity reacted to it. Small protests erupted across cities. Some demanded governments release the real data. Others urged restraint, fearing that drawing attention might provoke whatever is out there. Online, two worlds formed. One that saw 3I Atlas as hope, and another that saw it as warning. Between them, the silence of those who actually held the data. In the observatories, the blue light of 3I Atlas still pulsed each night, steady, rhythmic, as if it were watching how humanity responded. No one knew who was observing whom. But one thing was clear: the debate over the mothership theory had made the world feel smaller than it had ever felt before. Late June 2024, the world grew still after months of debate. No more meetings, no more rebuttals, no more defenses. Everyone was exhausted. The final signals from 3I Atlas were still being received, but no one argued about their meaning anymore. The blue light continued its old rhythm, steady, calm, like a distant breath. Avi Loeb remained silent. He wrote nothing more, and when asked in a rare interview, he said only, "Perhaps we did hear it, but we were not quiet enough to understand." What is this? The observatories kept working. Numbers still filled the logs, but curiosity had softened into acceptance. A strange sense that they were standing before something vast, and that to name it would be to disturb it. On Earth, cities glowed with artificial light, and yet beneath that brightness, people began to feel the shadow of a presence, not threatening, just quietly watching. As summer drifted on, 3I Atlas slipped farther from the sun's glare. It faded, but it did not disappear. Still following its perfect orbit, still pulsing with faultless precision. Scientists called this the year of silence. No breakthroughs, no answers. Only one truth remained. Humanity was no longer the only one looking up. A chapter closed, preparing for the next, when 3I Atlas would begin to change again. No longer silent, but carrying the first signs of life. July 2024, 3I Atlas emerged from the sun's glare, and for the first time in months, the telescopes could see it again. The initial signal was faint, but when the data was processed, scientists noticed something deeply strange. The object no longer reflected light as it once had. Its brightness shifted in cycles. Every 11 hours, a sharp, rhythmic fluctuation pulsed through it. Such behavior was impossible for a comet or frozen body. The models broke down. Only one explanation remained. 3I Atlas was changing itself. The first images from the James Webb Telescope confirmed it. Across its surface appeared patches of uneven reflection, some bright, some dim, forming symmetrical geometric patterns, straight lines, right angles, parallel bands of reflection. Nature does not draw that way. At a NASA press briefing, the spokesperson offered only one sentence: "We are observing a rare event." 10 times, that single sentence unsettled more than it calmed. At Harvard, Avi Loeb returned to the cameras. He didn't mention the word mothership. He simply said, "Any organized structural change in an object in space bears the mark of a deliberate energy process." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. No one dared to say it. Over the next 10 days, 3I Atlas continued to evolve. The reflective bands converged into a double helix structure, a shape hauntingly reminiscent of DNA, but on a cosmic scale. Its signal changed too. The 23-minute pulse was gone. In its place, shorter, sharper oscillations, clean, precise. Radar arrays detected radio bursts, occurring every 33 seconds, the same number as its designation, 3I Atlas 33b, assigned after its first observation. Coincidence or acknowledgement? Mathematicians called it a memory synchronization pattern, a kind of cognitive feedback loop, as if the object were recalling the data humanity had once used to define it. Soon, people began referring to it by a new name: the passive living system. It didn't act, it responded. Predictably, rhythmically, purposefully. An ESA physicist put it best: it isn't sending signals to communicate, it's sending signals to maintain its presence. E ruled reach, and the spec the ruled another 10. The phrase spread quickly. For many, it became the clearest description of 3I Atlas yet. No one knew why it was changing, but one truth became clear: the object had entered a new phase. Spectral analysis revealed that its surface emitted ultra-low frequency radiation, a form of energy typically seen only in advanced technological systems. If this was a natural phenomenon, it was the first of its kind. If not, humanity was witnessing a controlled activation. Researchers began using a new word: awakening. They didn't define it. They simply felt it, that 3I Atlas was no longer inert. It was reacting to sunlight and perhaps to us. Around the world, people turned their lenses skyward again. The blue shimmer of 3I Atlas was now visible to the naked eye, blinking gently in the dark. No one doubted its existence anymore. The only question left was, what is it trying to become? July 2024. 3I Atlas was no longer just a moving object. It began altering the space around itself. Observation stations detected the appearance of faint reflection trails, repeating at steady intervals. Light seemed to bend, and every 33 seconds, the reflected energy rose by a tiny pulse. That was not a natural phenomenon. No comet or celestial body could maintain such stability. Scientists called it a temporary reflection network, a thin, fragmented structure, yet synchronized with the signal emitted by 3I Atlas. It was as if it were building an invisible array of antennas around the Sunday. Data from the Webb telescope showed small reflective regions appearing and disappearing, as if millions of metallic particles were moving in unison under the same command. Each time 3I Atlas sent out a pulse, those regions brightened simultaneously. It was no longer coincidence, it was coordination. Physicists named the phenomenon coherent reflection, many small elements reflecting light in perfect rhythm, amplifying one another's waves. This effect could only occur if the entire system were controlled as one. An internal ESA report stated, "There is a possibility of a distributed reflection network, synchronized by an energy source located at the position of 3I Atlas. Simply put, 3I Atlas was constructing a structure around the Sunday. Not a solid one, but a network of energy, a colossal mirror, bending sunlight and solar wind in perfect cycles. The only question left was, for what purpose? Some scientists believed it was experimenting with solar wind modulation, turning plasma energy into data. Others thought it was creating a communication channel, using the space around the star as a medium for signal transmission. Avi Loeb didn't dismiss either view. He simply said, quietly, during a meeting, "This could be the most intelligent energy harvesting system we've ever seen." By mid-month, a strange event occurred. The Parker Solar Probe, the closest spacecraft to the Sun, recorded a narrow wind corridor stretching millions of kilometers. Plasma density dropped, velocity slowed, as if something were guiding the solar flow. That corridor matched the location of one of the reflective regions previously observed by Webb. No one dared make a definitive claim, but everyone knew something massive was operating out there. On Earth, observatories detected gentle oscillations in the magnetosphere, a 33-second cycle, identical to 3I Atlas's signal. It was as if its heartbeat echoed back to the planet. Researchers called it the planetary resonance effect, a coincidence too precise to believe it was random. A young engineer at NASA spoke during a meeting. "Maybe this isn't a construction. Maybe it's a test." No one replied, only silence. And within that silence, on the radar screens, 3I Atlas kept pulsing steadily. Every 33 seconds, a faint light, a sign of existence. The scientific community no longer debated whether it was real. The question had changed. What is it doing to our sun? August 2024. Solar radiation changed. Very slightly, very delicately, but enough for instruments to notice. For decades, the oscillations of the solar wind had remained stable. Now, they repeated in a new rhythm. 33 seconds. From Earth, that span was too short for the human eye to detect, but to observatories, it was as clear as a heartbeat. It was as if the sun was breathing. NASA released its first report. There is no immediate danger to the planet, but the energy fluctuations are occurring in an unprecedented pattern. It sounded routine, but those who understood felt uneasy. In the ionosphere, radio waves began to tremble. Some frequencies weakened, others surged unnaturally. Everything seemed to follow the 33-second rhythm. At the observatories, the bright pulses from 3I Atlas continued steadily. Each time its light flared, the solar wind shifted ever so slightly, as if the entire stellar system were responding to a command. No one dared to claim a connection, yet no one doubted it anymore. All measurements pointed to the same source. A plasma physicist remarked, 3I Atlas might be experimenting with energy interaction. It isn't just reflecting, it's modulating the sun's reactions at a microscopic level. That hypothesis silenced the room. If true, it meant the object could alter the radiation environment of the entire solar system. A question arose during an emergency ESA meeting. If it can influence the sun, what could it do to Earth? No one answered. Later, when the Harvard team analyzed radar data, they found something even stranger. The reflective signals from 3I Atlas were not only directed toward the sun, but also oscillating toward Earth, a faint wave pattern, with an almost perfect amplitude, repeating every 33 seconds. It was as if it were synchronizing with this planet. On social media, people began calling it the universe's shared heartbeat. No one knew if it was real, But the idea spread quickly. Millions tuned in to NASA's live data feed, listening to the sound converted from light signals, a slow, steady rhythm, like the sound of a heart. When that sound played, many people cried, not out of fear, but from the strange sense that the universe was alive. An astrobiologist said, "We've been searching for life in our own image, but perhaps the life we're witnessing is of a kind we cannot name." That line became the year's most quoted sentence. By the end of the month, solar radiation stabilized again, but it did not return to its old state. It retained the 33-second rhythm, like a memory imprinted in energy. Everyone knew, even if 3I Atlas were to leave, its trace would remain, embedded in the very breath of the star we depend on. A physicist murmured in an internal bulletin, "Perhaps the sun has learned a new song, and perhaps the one who taught it that song was 3I Atlas." September 2024. After the 33-second rhythm had been steadily recorded from the sun, Earth began to change. Not dramatically, but enough for those attuned to feel it. The upper atmosphere showed faint oscillations. The magnetic field fluctuated in sync with the data from 3I Atlas. Stations across Europe and South America registered weak electrical pulses, repeating every 33 seconds. Scientists called the phenomenon the echo from the Sunday, and he have 2000 to the Ron, to Fellhead 87s of the Warmans, an energy reflection, traveling from the solar corona through the solar wind and cascading down into the planet's ionosphere. No one could see it, but the sense of a new rhythm in space was undeniable. A steady, subtle, elusive pulse. In laboratories, plasma detectors began vibrating to the same rhythm. It wasn't a technical glitch, it was resonance. A cycle in which the whole planet seemed to be taking part. An old physicist said, "Perhaps this is the first time in history that Earth is singing with the Sunday." People chuckled softly, but no one denied it. Since the arrival of 3I Atlas, every energy measuring instrument had become more sensitive, as if a new layer of communication were opening. Some researchers suggested that the object might be tuning the sun to reach a resonant frequency with Earth. If true, it was no longer observation, it was interaction. Avi Loeb said simply, "Perhaps it's trying to speak to us in the language of energy." After that, he disappeared from public view. Only short bulletins remained, fragmented data tables, and the silence of research agencies. The final report of 2024 stated plainly, the 33-second frequency now persists stably in the plasma layers around Earth. Cause unknown. Observatories still detected a faint blue glow from 3I Atlas. Dim, but still there. No one knew what it was doing, or whether it was still active. But everyone could feel that. The universe had shifted, just slightly. The sun had a new rhythm, and Earth seemed to be moving in harmony with it. At the end of the year, on a quiet night, a small observatory in Chile reported that 3I Atlas's reflected light had nearly vanished, flickering only faintly in the distance. Yet the 33-second signal continued. It was as if it had left a fragment of itself behind, embedded in the solar system's field of energy. A young astronomer wrote in his journal, "It's not leaving. We're just getting used to its presence." The story closed in silence. No event, no conclusion, only a feeling that the sun and Earth had learned to speak through light, and somewhere out there, in the dim space between the stars, 3I Atlas remained silent. But that silence now carried the echo of our own heartbeat. October 2024. The surface of the Sun began to show unusually large sunspots. NASA's telescopes recorded powerful energy buildup across the star's equatorial zone. A coronal mass ejection, a CME, was forming. No one was surprised. CMEs were common, but this time was different. The brightness spiked suddenly, and the direction of the eruption aligned perfectly with the orbital path of 3I Atlas. Observatories across the world redirected their instruments. A massive stream of plasma was racing outward at nearly 1,500 kilometers per second. If it struck, any natural object in its path would be torn apart. Everyone assumed 3I Atlas would vanish, but it didn't move, didn't change course. It simply stayed still, as if waiting. Inside NASA's Operations Center, a stunned engineer whispered, "It knows." The CME drew closer. Sensors aboard the Parker Solar Probe detected violent magnetic fluctuations. Waves of energy pulsed outward like colossal heartbeats. And through all that chaos, 3I Atlas remained, clear, stable, motionless. When the plasma stream hit, every radar display flared white. For several seconds, data feeds were saturated, unreadable. No one could see anything. Then, everything went silent again. The observatories scrambled to recheck the data. The CME had passed, but 3I Atlas was still there, unaffected, undamaged. In fact, brighter. Its reflected light had tripled. Ultraviolet radiation around it had risen by 40%, and the familiar 33-second frequency was gone. In its place appeared a new cycle, 22 minutes, 14 seconds. Slow, measured, unnervingly precise. A plasma physicist said quietly, "It absorbed the CME." No one could explain how. That plasma burst carried the energy of hundreds of millions of nuclear bombs. No icy body could survive it. Yet 3I Atlas not only endured, it glowed stronger, as though it were feeding on the sun itself. At Harvard, Avi Loeb examined the first incoming data from the event. He spoke slowly. Perhaps this was the process it needed. Not an accident, a trigger. The words hung in the air. If true, 3I Atlas had just entered a new phase. In the hours following impact, the Webb telescope recorded faint distortions around its surface. A thin plasma ring encircled 3I Atlas, then stabilized into a soft halo. When magnified, fine wave-like patterns could be seen rippling across its body, deliberate, geometric. No comet could create such symmetry. Across control centers, the tone shifted. No one laughed anymore. No one called it just an unusual comet. A NASA engineer wrote in his log, "I think we just witnessed something, not of nature." Online, millions watched the visualized simulation of the collision. The vast plasma cloud engulfed the object. Then light burst outward from it, like a mirror reflecting the storm. No explosion, no disintegration, only silence. And within that silence, 3I Atlas seemed to have awakened. After the collision, telescopes continued to record what no one could quite believe. 3I Atlas had not only survived, it began to emit light in a new rhythm. 22 minutes and 14 seconds. The light wasn't bright. It was smooth, steady, like breathing. Spectral analysis revealed a type of radiation never before observed. A hybrid blend of ultraviolet and low-frequency radio waves. Scientists called it hybrid light. What was strange was that each time 3I Atlas pulsed, the sun's magnetic field trembled slightly. and the solar wind slowed for a few seconds, as if the object were synchronizing its energy cycle with the star itself. NASA offered no explanation. ESA stated only, "No known natural phenomenon corresponds to this behavior." Avi Loeb, however, remained calm. He said, "If it truly is an artificial system, this is how it recharges." During the 48 hours following the impact, sensors recorded a steady increase in radiation from 3I Atlas. From a single faint point, it expanded into a luminous sphere over 80 kilometers wide. Inside, light pulses moved in concentric patterns, as though streams of energy were circulating around a core. A young physicist remarked, "It's not just existing, it's functioning." And when the 22-minute signal appeared for the third time, the Webb telescope detected a thin beam of light stretching outward from 3I Atlas, pointing toward interplanetary space. No one knew what it was, but everyone understood. 3I Atlas had just answered the Sunday. A few days after the collision, Earth's magnetic monitoring stations began detecting something strange. The 22-minute cycle signal appeared in the data, faint but undeniable. It wasn't interference. It was a real oscillation, one that no physical model could explain. In geostationary orbit, several satellites briefly lost contact. Their systems rebooted automatically, without any recorded malfunction. At the same time, the ionosphere began to pulse in rhythm with 3I Atlas. Scientists called it the plasma feedback effect. It appeared that the energy 3I Atlas had absorbed from the CME was now radiating back toward the solar system in an extremely weak wave, but strong enough to resonate with the planet's magnetic field. Avi Loeb wasn't surprised. He said, "When a system reaches a certain level of energy, it doesn't just react. It begins to teach the space around it how to resonate. This is the sprand, Cometerin no pand." For 3 days, Earth vibrated in a steady cycle of energy oscillation. No harm was done, just a subtle feeling, as instruments, radio signals, even atomic clocks drifted out of sync. By fractions of a second, a quiet synchronization, as if time itself were adjusting to join the rhythm. On the night of October 18th, the Webb telescope captured something extraordinary. A thin streak of light extended from 3I Atlas, flashed 3 times, then disappeared. 3 pulses, perfectly matching Earth's rotational frequency. No one dared to speak it aloud, but everyone thought the same thing. It was synchronizing with the planet. A young astronomer whispered, "Maybe 3I Atlas is trying to talk to Earth." The 21st of October 2024, 3I Atlas entered its most intense luminous phase since discovery. Its glow was no longer the familiar blue. It had turned silver-white, bright enough to be seen through civilian telescopes. The 22-minute signal increased in amplitude. Each emission pulse grew stronger than the last, causing faint interference across Earth's entire radio spectrum. Satellite communications flickered out for seconds, then returned. NASA described it as the energy saturation phase, the point where the object reached the limit of its energy intake. But only hours later, every instrument exceeded its measurable threshold. The graph stopped showing numbers, replaced by a single blinding streak stretching off the scale. Then 3I Atlas erupted. For 11 seconds, it released light 10 times brighter than the sun's reflection. Every sensor across the solar system was flooded. Observatories shut down to prevent damage. No one knew what was happening. When systems came back online, 3I Atlas had changed. It was no longer a point of light. but a faint, expanding structure spanning thousands of kilometers, a mist of luminous haze, unfolding slowly, evenly, and in perfect silence. Scientists called it the energy expansion phase. A physicist at ESA said, "There's no doubt anymore. 3I Atlas has completed its activation." The 22-minute signal ceased. No more oscillations, no more reflections, only a steady, silent radiance. So beautiful that, for a moment, people forgot they were afraid. At Harvard, Avi Loeb received the final data transmission. He said quietly, "Perhaps it just fulfilled the reason it came here." After that, 3I Atlas faded. Its silver light dissolved into the solar corona. Radar stations detected nothing. It was as if the object had never existed. But hours later, something strange occurred. The sun released a burst of plasma twice as strong as normal, yet no geomagnetic storm followed. Instead, the energy spread softly, evenly, as if it had been calibrated. From that day forward, solar radiation became smoother, more consistent, and the long-lost 33-second frequency, the first heartbeat of 3I Atlas, suddenly reappeared in the data. A cycle completed, a perfect loop. No one knew where 3I Atlas had gone, but clearly, it had left a mark within the sun's very rhythm. After billions of years of silence, the sun, it seemed, had learned a new beat. November 2024, 3 weeks after the CME event, when measurement systems finally came back online, 3I Atlas was no longer where it had been. It remained in its near-solar orbit, but its motion had slowed, more stable, more deliberate, and its reflected light had changed completely. No longer polarized, it now diffused softly, as though emanating from ultrafine matter. When scientists recalculated its parameters, they discovered something unbelievable. The mass of 3I Atlas had increased nearly tenfold. From the original estimate of a few billion tons, the figure had risen to over 33 billion. No one understood how. There were no signs of accretion, no fractures, no new impact. It had simply grown heavier. During a meeting at ESA, a physicist remarked, "If this is an error, it's a globally synchronized one. Every independent system reports the same result." Its mass had increased, yet its gravitational field had not. No orbital deviation appeared around it. The starlight behind it showed no bending, which meant that 3I Atlas possessed mass, but generated no gravity. The phenomenon contradicted Einstein's general relativity entirely. If an object had mass, it must curve spacetime. Yet, in every dataset, there was no trace of gravitational distortion, a Japanese researcher wrote in his report. 3I Atlas exists as a massive object without a gravitational field, which is equivalent to saying it is nullifying its own physical existence. The term localized gravity cancellation was introduced